Click.
Hello and welcome to the Hugh Hatrick Show with with two guests tonight. But the first one is a very, very special guest who we've not had on the show for nearly 4 years. It is, of course, James Ruppert. It's great to see you, James. How are you tonight?
I'm extremely well, and all the better for seeing you, Hugh. Thank you very much for all your support over the years, and it's very nice to be back.
Oh, it's great to see you. And James is, for those who are watching for the first time, who have not seen James before, now are you currently working for Autocar? Is that because you were writing for them?
No.
All right.
I've been sacked.
Oh dear.
I've been sacked for writing about cheap cars.
Oh goodness.
Oh,
which doesn't fit their profile. I don't.
cardinal sin.
No,
Big mistake. How dare you?
after 18 years, Hugh. After 18 years of service, I've been hung out to dry. So unfortunately, up until a month ago, I was one of their columnists. No longer do. So that's a shame. They can do what they want. It's in their, nobody has to employ me. But actually writing about cheaper cars, readers always used to tell me that was the thing that they like the most, because there's supercars in there and all sorts of things that cost £1 million, which are not relevant at all. And there's me pointing at something for a few £1,000 that will do a turn. But unfortunately, that's not terribly popular anymore. So there you go. After all these years, I mean, I'm also quite controversial these days. I talk to Jeff Buys Cars, and I do stuff with Free Car Mag, which is slightly controversial. I think some of my covers I enjoy doing, where I'm having a go at what's going on. I think the motoring media have forgotten why they exist. They're there to support the motorist, and they're there to sure there's doing well, and it's got nothing to do. Being on the side of the manufacturers doesn't help you. Okay, there's advertising to be lost, but you could get so much more brownie points really if you just stood up and said what the truth was.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really been in the last few years. I think ever since the kind of the big climate get-togethers, wasn't it? When they have all these climate yearly, shows that they all sign up to these regulations that then mean that now we've actually got to do something. I think for a long time they didn't have to do very much. We had to pay all that money to be part of it. But now they've signed up to these regulations. It means we have to have so many EV sales against petrol and diesel, and then of course trying to phase petrol and
reason
diesel
why
out.
they're selling them, isn't it? Because they've got this legislation. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's put the price of cars up dramatically, especially new cars have gone through the roof. But it's also really phased. It's had a huge contribution to the used car market, isn't it? The car prices went shooting up, and then they came crashing down again. Do you think, in the way that it is just now, do you think it's going to? What do you see as the kind of current trend of kind of used car prices and maybe some bargains that are out there?
We're in for some interesting times. It depends how it's going to be played. What we've always got to bear in mind is that the government can do anything. So if they want to get rid of E5 petrol tomorrow, they can do. And that would really drop us in it when it comes to older cars that are 10 or 20 years old and classics. And they'll just force you to buy made up fuel. I mean, the synthetic fuel, again, is a massive that we no need for it at all. So we've always got to bear that in mind. They can tax us quite badly. I'm sure they're going to do something about classic cars at some point. The fact that the classic cars are sitting there untaxed, they're going to go after our hobby because we're the wrong demographic driving them as well. So they want to target us. The great thing is there are some superb cars around. It is possible still to buy bargains. I was very lucky to be able to do that today. The expansion of the ultra low emission zones is not good at all. That really does affect people. And I bought a car, unfortunately, which isn't ultra low emission zone compliant, but luckily I live in an area where that's fairly academic. And if I go somewhere else, well, maybe I'll take another car. But you've got to be able to shop quite wisely. Diesel is such a shame because it's been demonized to such an extent. What that means is that there's a lot of bargains about. That's the only sort of upside to it. But whether they legislate them, out completely, we've all got to sort of brace ourselves for. So I think we can all do pretty well. We don't have to spend more than a few £1,000s. So that again, if everything, if they do suddenly, switch the tax up. I was talking to someone about that today. It's the fact that the top rate of tax, once you're over 2006, 2007, you're paying nearly £1,000. You're paying 800 quid. That happened with the car that my wife had. It was basically keeping her awake at night. It was like I'm paying £800 to keep this car going, and it's madness because if we're paying that much, then the roads should be billiard smooth, shouldn't they? We should be living in Narnia. We should be so happy, but we're not. It's that's the way tax works. It gets spent on all sorts of nonsense. So we've always got to be aware of that. I think it's just minimising our losses, so that what we're driving, we're not going to lose a fortune on, and that we can work around in most cases. But I think there's some great diesel bargains. It's still petrol cars are still great, and they're still extremely reliable as well. And as Andrew said, you can get a couple of 100,000 miles out of a petrol engine very easily indeed. You've just got to change the oil and keep on top of things. And I think that's what more and more people have to do. I think the problem is that people aren't as interested in cars as they used to be. Once upon a time, that's what your dad did. That's what your granddad did. They would de-coke the Austin 7 on a Sunday morning. And that was great because it meant they understood how the whole car worked. And it would be great if we could get back to that. Maybe we've got to encourage youngsters a bit more, to do.
But they can't access anything in modern cars, can they? It's all covered away, and not just that. I've something that bothers me about the standard of driving is that there's so many electronic gizmos now, and humans are, I think, essentially lazy. So if something's taking over for us and making our life easier, most people won't put in the effort to learn how to drive well because they just consider that, computer's doing it for me. The brakes the computer will put the brakes on for me, and I'm seeing more and more people tailgating, more and more people going too fast in inappropriate places. I'm not against speed and driving spiritedly, but there's places where you shouldn't do that, or conditions you shouldn't do that in. So everything about the modern car is dissuading people from doing anything other than just buying it and driving it along without a clue what, like you say, without any sort of mechanical understanding or sympathy with it, without understanding how to drive it properly. It's nuts. It's kind of worrying in a way. I don't know what you think about that, but that's sort of from my perspective.
Well, I think you need a healthy market, though, don't you? In terms of a healthy new and used car market is really good because that keeps the prices affordable. And then you're able to, that's why I love the Dacias, because you could get a great car for $7,000 or even $6,000. It was next to nothing. And if it was secondhand, then you could buy an ex demo or a year or two old or something much older and get yourself an absolute banger. But it can last for a good few years. I think the problem is now, because everything's gone electric, there's so little choice, especially in the new cars. A new car now, I think the cheapest new car is about £12,500 or thereabouts, or maybe even more. You might get a pre-registered, but before it was $7,000, and it's just gone up so much, and that stops people, as we were talking earlier, if they need a car to get to work. How do they do that? If you need to get up at 6, for work for 6 in, you can't get the bus, you can't get the train. You need a car to get there. And what do they think is going to happen to the jobs if they get rid of the cars that are affordable?
No, that's right. But Hugh, you have bought the correct car. I've got some good friends who are professional mechanics, and they like the Dacia. They really do. They say, it's old Renault technology, but it's understandable. It really is. You unbolt and bolt things on. There's nothing overwhelmingly complicated, and so So they are good. Just as a matter of interest, I've recently fascinating because on them, to open the glove box, you have to press a button on a screen. So
that kind of button.
Right, there's that one. That kind of button. So it's not that there aren't loads of menus to go through, but you still have to go to the screen. So it isn't on the box. So you have to press a screen to open that. And the other thing is, I've driven a Polestar 4, which doesn't have a back window, which is, which is, again, it's another complication. It's something nobody really asked for.
Yeah.
Well, when you say it hasn't got a back window, do you mean?
I mean, it's a bit like driving a van, isn't it? Really, you know.
Oh,
yeah,
the
side. The design of it's flat.
But what it has,
it's weird.
What it is, it's to make it a more fastback shape, so there's a lower rear shelf at the back. So it's a design thing. So instead of that, what you have is a camera. So when you look in the rear view mirror, you're looking at a sort of
image.
Virtual reality. In some respects, it's meant to be very, very good because at night you get a much, much clearer view from behind than you would because you're using a camera. And if it's raining, there won't be droplets and reflections, and that's quite clever. But if you're going to buy one in 10 years' time, you're going to have a bit of a problem, aren't you? If you buy one and you need a new camera part, so that's like £1 million to engineer. So, but it is just one of those things where I don't need that. It's a bit like the strange things they're doing with side mirrors as well. It's just like there's cameras, there's not mirrors. Well, I don't want cameras. I want a mirror, because if I break a mirror, I can replace a mirror. But once it gets to cameras, it's it's
nightmare.
Oh, I think it's just dropped out a wee bit. Are you still there?
It's frozen up.
And I'm back.
You're back.
your internet needs. You need to feed the hamster.
Dropping out.
Get some hamster food out for the little the internet hamster.
We've all been dropping out. We've all been dropping in and out this evening, I must say.
It's a thing, isn't it? I mean, I heard a great story of some poor chap who had bought a Vauxhall Mokka electric car, the electric version, top of the range, and it was like £31,000. And it was supposed to do over 200 miles on a charge, and you could never get more than about 90 on it. And that wasn't even using all the features, the air conditioning, or anything else. And he had all these problems with it. It wouldn't charge quickly. It was dropping charge. And he took it back to the Vauxhall garage, and he'd paid finance on this thing, hundreds of pounds a month, and they offered him £18,000 for it, and that was after 3 months. And I mean, and he just saying, "Good grief," because the garage obviously didn't want to take it on because they just thought, well, how are they going to fix it and take it back? So he had to keep it because he had so much negative equity in it. He couldn't afford to take that back. But it's a shocker, and I mean, the funny thing is that there was a Mazda. I saw a Mazda. Is it the new EX30? I think it is. It's only been out for a couple of years, and it was at Motorpoint, and it was only I think it was 2 years old, and it was originally £30,000, and now it was 11.5. And I thought, I mean, it can't get for that. It's a bargain if you've got a charger at home. That's a great bargain. Yeah. But I think probably the Mazda's probably one of the better
one
ones.
hasn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, that one, it hasn't got a great range either, because it's designed to be that way.
Yeah.
Oh, we've gone and we've come back. Yeah, the EX30, unfortunately, is another electric vehicle that I've driven, which is quite claustrophobic inside, but it does have a rear window. But the idea behind that is that it was meant to be quite a small and light thing. I mean, even £11,000. I mean, if you're just using it as we've discussed before for shopping and stuff like that, you might be able to make a case for it. If you all this boils down to, can you afford it? Yeah, well, great. Knock yourself out. There is no problem with it. But as you point out, the used values of these are falling off a cliff. And what's happening is, which has happened in the car market for years and years and years, is pre-registering. There's just a massive amount of that going on to look, oh, great, look, we're selling loads of EVs and they're not being sold at all. They're just being parked in fields. And what a tremendous waste of resources that is.
Now, here's the thing. Do you think some manufacturers, because we were talking earlier about Jaguar, and I think Alfa Romeo as well, potentially, although now that it's part of the Stellantis group, they may be able to kind of rescue it with some sense. But do you think some major manufacturers might actually go bust? I'd had rumours that Jeep in America was really struggling. Do you think that maybe that because of the EV push, some of these manufacturers are literally on the credit limit and don't have much left?
I would have thought so. Yeah, absolutely. I think they made big mistakes. The problem is with car companies is that they don't actually have people who like cars running them. It would be much better if there were actually enthusiasts, and that's particularly the case with Jaguar. But they have gone down the route, and there isn't any turning back for them, because once the cars are gone, they're gone. And I really don't think that there's an EV that anybody would want to buy. And I think, Hugh, you're completely correct. I mean, I think Volkswagen have had lots of financial problems, and they're doubling back hugely on things, because when you think about it, a company as massive as Volkswagen, have realised that they've got it so badly wrong. Ford as well. So absolutely. And maybe somebody does need to be taught, a lesson. It might wake them up. It's very, very late. But maybe it will.
I'm hoping the manufacturers. I think Stellantis Group seem to be about the only one that are, and Volkswagen as well, cutting on their EV production. In fact, I think they've closed a factory in Germany because they need to make some major cuts. But I know Stellantis Group has now decided to make more cars with petrol and diesel because of this, and I wonder whether their influence might actually finally get through to the EU, because obviously they're putting most of these regulations in place. And again, of course, Britain, that's charging £15,000 a car if to any manufacturer who doesn't sell the 24% of the amount of vehicles in a year that are electric, which I think, as that was under a Conservative government, which was, I think, truly atrocious, the kind of regulation that they came out with. But I fear for companies like Alfa Romeo that are kind of on the sideline. Yes, it may be part of Fiat, and that's part of Peugeot, Citroën, and so on. But you kind of think, if it doesn't pay, if they've made that commitment and they can't either change it or make it work, they're going to be in big trouble. And to lose a mark like Jaguar or Alfa Romeo would be a real tragic event for all of us who love cars.
Absolutely. Now, the problem is that the car manufacturers have not stood up to the governments. They have too easily bowed down to what they wanted to do. And again, this is the problem of having people who are managers rather than car lovers in charge, because this goes way back to diesel. As well, it's people who have no expertise whatsoever being able to make this legislation. All this purely stems from politicians being told electric cars are zero emissions, and as soon as they heard that, they went, "Yep, that's it. We're going to have electric cars," and manufacturers went along with it. So in a way, they have created their own problem. And so
I remember talking to Fiat salesmen, Fiat business representatives at Company Car a few years ago, and they were trying to say, 25% or 30% of all our customers coming in are wanting electric vans. And the Fiat thing was it? So, what's the main big Fiat van that they have? It's the same as like it's like the Renault, not the Renault Master. There's Fiat Ducato, and they made an electric Fiat Ducato, and it's like £80,000 or something ridiculous, and nobody can buy them, or even the councils can't afford to buy them. And they're lucky if they get 5% of people asking about them. And it was kind of crazy. But they've done that. I remember I had friends who worked for a council in Scotland, and they got given Nissan. I think it's EV200s, so the kind of van, the small little van that they have. And he used to move housing association clients from one house to another, and he was given this Nissan EV200 to do the job. And the first person they came to, they had a piano that needed moved, and they managed somehow. They managed to get it in. They actually managed to get the piano into the van, and it did all of 25 miles before expiring, or because of the weight, it couldn't take it. So and it cost double the price. They're about £30,000 or whatever it cost. And this is what annoys me. The government, every council will portray, they'll be driving around town in their new electric van. These VW, the new hub vans, or they got the ones that were based on the old hippie vans. The one.
Something.
The Buzz van. It's the Buzz.
Yeah, Buzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
£75,000 new for the actual car version, the passenger version, but the van is still at least 60-odd thousand. And Northumberland Council has bought a whole bunch of them, saying zero emissions. And even then, they're smaller and they don't do the job. How are you going to move somebody in that, or it's the NHS buying these things? Goodness knows what they do with them. But
but just imagine again if the who like cars, they'd have looked at the Buzz and thought, yeah, that's really cool, let's stick a diesel in it, and the sales would have gone through the roof, because loads of people would have thought, it's
a lovely looking vehicle, really smart looking vehicle, isn't it?
And it would have been 30 grand cheaper.
But it's like you're saying about the people making all these decisions. It's not just that they're not car enthusiasts; they're also total hypocrites. Because, like Hugh was saying earlier, when they all get together and they talk about emissions and reducing emissions, and these are the people that, when they were up in Glasgow, they're putting everybody up on in huge
diesel
cruise ships, which have got massive diesel generators in them, and then they're all driving around in electric cars that they're charging up overnight using diesel generators. It's like utter hypocrisy. Yeah, and that phrase, zero emission, oh God, I'm a chemist, and they're not zero emission. Absolutely not. But people are so thick. Yeah. Honestly, people are so stupid. I want it zero emission. Is it? So it didn't have to be built, and you don't have to charge it. And what you're charging it with? Where does the electricity come from? The sweet smell of your environmental fart? Come on. It's ridiculous.
But, see, for me as well, as a motorsport fan, we play all these games that have these great classic cars in them, where they have all the cars that we really like. And the thing is, a lot of the guys following are many of them are youngsters, and so they kind of they've been brought up with all the EV stuff and all the kind of propaganda of this. And what I've been trying to tell them is that if you don't actually, stand up for keeping a petrol or a diesel car, you won't have any more classic cars. Any car that you like today, you won't actually in real life ever be able to buy one or be able to get, be able to use it, because it will disappear or it will be banned. As you say, they won't be allowed to use it, or they'll restrict the fuel so we can't use it. And it's a very kind of important message that we actually see through what the government is telling us. And even now, if you go to the cinema and you see an Audi advert, called the most boring adverts that are ever there, and it's some huge Audi Q9 electric, that weighs about 4 tons, costs £100,000 and does about 30 miles on a charge. But it's the next best thing. At least in the old days, I'm sure, James, you'd agree, the car adverts in the 80s and the 90s were fantastic.
Wow, just the old Audi Quattro adverts. And the old Saab 900 turbo adverts, when it's going through that quarry and then the Saab Viggen or whatever goes over the... Wow, I remember watching those thinking, I want one of them. I don't see any car today you think, I want one of them. Well, that's not entirely true. There's things like Gordon Murray's fantastic creations and the odd Pagani or something like that, like I'll ever be able to even... I probably won't ever see one, but they're quite nice. Some Koenigsegg, but normal cars, I don't look at them and go, "Oh yeah, I like that."
Stuff is horrible.
I always did. I used to wow, look at that. Whatever it was, anything.
Here's a question for you, James. What do you think is the worst used car on the market? What do you think is one of the worst cars on the market?
It's very in a way that. There hasn't been a bad car for quite a few years. I know people might argue against that, but actually, cars in the last 10, 20 years have actually been not half bad, really. It's hard to find a bad one. I mean, when you get to used cars, then it comes down to condition. That's what you're always going to buy on. Has it been looked at? Because you could have a fantastic. I mean, I like Japanese cars, I like German cars, I like Swedish cars. But if it hasn't been looked after, then you should run the other way. It's going to cost you a fortune to sort out. So in a way, there aren't any shockers. Whereas when we were younger, there was the Morris Marina. That was pretty terrible. Morris Ital, which when they dressed up, and I bought one of those
brown.
but I bought it for a few £100, so it was okay. But yeah, they were pretty terrible cars.
That special colour brown they used to do. Just very special colour brown that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
That was it. No, but yeah, British Leyland used to make some terrible cars, especially for us. And once they were a few years old, they were even worse. They were pretty bad when they were, built. But these days, everything is okay. The worst you can say about cars is, it's a bit boring. It's a bit dreary to drive, or it looks dull. But really, when it comes to the sort of cars that we actually quite like, it's just that you want a car that's just going to do you a job and not break down.
But that's true.
That
is true.
Really,
we had here at
what does Andrew think?
I think you're right. The car design and manufacture is just so much better now. I mean, when I say I look at the cars and they don't excite me, but they are very, very reliable and comfortable and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I got a friend who lives near Leeds. He's got a Vitara. The new Vitara is a 1 litre. Turbocharged Vitara, and it's so surprising how much torque that little engine has got. The technology they've got in engines now, I think, is fantastic. My worry about the latest cars, apart from that you can't get to things to fix them, it's all you got to plug something in, and the computer tells you no. But it's the weight. Cars are so heavy now because of all the gumph they have to put on it. For various, but they're also very safe. So I suppose it helps with that as well. I mean, you're right. I was sort of being negative because modern cars don't really just excite me. Whereas I used to be very excited by them. The sound of a car, even when you see the latest Porsche 992, with 600 horsepower, that's super fast and wonderful and can do all these amazing things, and it. Just to make it sound interesting, they've just got a loud exhaust, whereas you used to get a nice sounding engine, the engine sounding nice, the induction roar and all this kind of stuff. And now it's just like coming from the back, which gives you a headache. The character sort of seems to, I don't know what you think, James, the character of cars has sort of gone.
Fantastic!
If you want the definitive answer, Hugh might be able to help you in that. Yeah, these
that Toyota.
We were talking about that Toyota.
That mad Toyota.
Yes.
I mean, this will answer all of your questions. Everybody who's here tonight. Yeah, so there is 3 of them now. I mean, I'm mad. These take me so long to do, but they are sort of slightly therapeutic. But yeah, it's good to go back through cars and go through periods, because the 80s were quite a fascinating period really for cars. In some ways, it's when the working man's car did become good. There were cars you could rely on where it was very hit and miss. There was very, very few marks, but it was getting better. And then when you get to the 90s was probably a gold period. Have we got something on the 90s here? We might have.
I agree.
There's a 90s version, so you should buy
90s cars.
I'll have to get that one. I'll have to get the 90s one.
Have we got a link? Have we got a link, Hugh, that we can put in the description? We need links for his books because they look great.
They do. They are indeed.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
The only ones I've got is that.
All right.
Which I found again. It is a terrible book, but I had it bought for me many years ago. And then I lost it in the divorce. So I recently found that,
dear.
saw that, I thought, I've got to get that again. So, I had some good stuff. Oh, yeah. German Kiwis.
Yeah, because we've got. I mean, mainly our background is obviously motorsport in the main term of what we do on the channel. But all our games are driving classic cars, pretty much. So that's kind of the thing. And many of us love our old cars. We'd love. I mean, if I could find an Alfa Romeo 155 Silverstone, I would.
I would
love one. I would. My father had a 155 in 1997, and it was a 2-liter twin spark in a kind of. They called it champagne. Bronze, I think it was, and it was great. And when you went around the right-hand bend, it showed at the end that the tank was full of fuel, and when you went around the left-hand bend, it showed it was empty. It had these great kind of perks to it, but it was fantastic. It was such a good car, and the engine was just, the charisma at the time. And the
Alpha engines were superb.
Yeah, and its steering lock was 1.5 turns lock to lock. To get it around, it was incredible. Wasn't great for parking, but it was great for driving. But it was cars that could have.
Sorry. Yeah, Hugh, could I ask you about the touring cars? What's your view on the latest rounds of that? I mean, obviously, it was the final.
Oh, it's just.
What did you watch it and enjoy it, or what?
I mean, I've been to Croft quite recently, and I saw because it's not too far away from me.
Yeah.
And it is quite close racing, and the drivers are good, the cars are good, but it's not. It doesn't. I think because you can't. Well, maybe you can buy some of the cars they're based on. You've got Honda Civics, you've got BMW 3 Series and different ones. But I think the more it's changing, and I know they're trying to keep this petrol. Hybrid thing going on. They want to obviously they're having to develop this to keep all the regulations going and keep it alive. But like we always talk about the golden era, and I was talking to John Cleland a few weeks ago, who was a double British touring car champion in the 90s. And the thing is, his car he drove the Cavalier. He was famous for the Vauxhall Cavalier. And at that point, you watched the races, and you could go the next day and buy one in the showroom. I think it's lost that kind of charisma of you think, oh yeah, I've seen such and such one yesterday in his Mondeo or his Sierra Cosworth, and it kind of as a youngster you thought this was great. This is what you wanted to go and buy it. I struggle now with it. It has lost current motorsport, especially. I think has lost that kind of the charm. Of seeing your everyday cars being driven on the limit, which is fun, and also the manufacturers being all there. I mean, to be fair, when I was at Croft, BMW were there, and there were a few dealerships that were sponsoring. So you got to see those cars, but yeah, it was it has lost, and I wonder where is it going to go, because if this, I really hope this whole regulation collapses. Because then we might hopefully be able to recover some sense and have some petrol and diesel cars again. Because I do think what's going to be there in a few years' time. We used to love the Renault Megane RS, 280 horsepower, looks amazing in that bright yellow color that they have. And semi-automatic gearbox. And if you love cars and hot hatches, it's a great car. I remember driving one at Silverstone about 5 years ago. And it was brilliant. It's what driving, it makes you think this is what driving is all about, when you get a chance to drive something like that. But all the hot hatches have pretty much gone, or they've jokingly put them as an EV. Renault has made they've got the Alpine based on the new Renault 5. Fiat have used the 500. They've got an Abarth version of that at a mere £37,000. But it does make a sound, but they've had to use a petrol sound. They've actually made it have a fake engine sound.
They give them fake sounds, don't they?
Are we that stupid that we're just going to go along with it? Or surely these people who do motorsport, who are usually pretty intelligent people and people who have achieved something and have had to, spend thousands of pounds in the sport that they do, you would think they would be more robust and be able to stand up to this nonsense, but they haven't. And that's my fear, that unless we really kind of take our motorsport and our cars back, we're not gonna. We simply, it's going to be a disaster. They will get rid of motorsport if you carry on in this way, because how are we going to be able to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you're right there.
Yeah.
So what's the latest? I mean, because I've not really followed British touring cars for a couple of years now. I used to watch when Ash Sutton was getting his
he's very,
championship.
very good. Yeah.
And wasn't it? Didn't John Cleland say that he reckons he's probably the best one of them? I just remember him being a really feisty racer. I remember watching the last round, and it was going down, and he had to finish in a certain position, Ash Sutton, and then he'd win against Colin Turkington. And the team were desperately trying to stop him trying to overtake people because he hated just sitting there. All he had to do was stay calm and stay in the position he was in. He's like, no, I want to get past all these people. I just fantastic, which is what you want to see. Someone with that kind of feisty fight. That was great. But I don't know, have they changed the regulations then? What's the latest thing? Is it?
I think they want to go ahead with more petrol electric. They want to try and do a hybrid.
Right. Okay.
To be fair, I was going to watch it yesterday, and unfortunately, I was away most of the day, so I couldn't actually kind of watch the actual race itself. But I think on a broader scale, I don't think people just realise how much of a difference the whole EV regulations have made. And there was rumours that Labour were going to bring the 2035 regulations to get rid of petrol and diesel forward again back to 2030, which barely gives us 5 years. Now, hopefully, they might be out by 2029. But what's going to be there to be? I think chaos is going to emerge.
They have actually brought it, because I asked the question a few weeks ago, and they said yes, they are still going to do the ban. They have extended the hybrid to 2035, but no, the 2030 ruling is back.
Yeah, which is crazy. I don't think the manufacturers will be able to deliver it. And I think eventually it will collapse the government, because if they see that we are grinding to a halt and they don't have anything to fill it, we don't have the transport to be able to fill it, we are in big trouble. I mean, it could bring absolute gridlock, or in terms of just people losing their jobs and total chaos.
They want to change. They want to close the country, don't they? I mean, if we haven't got transport, it's like people talking about electric trucks, and like you're saying about the vans that do 20 miles and then stop being bought by. I mean, hasn't the mad police in Scotland got a bunch of electric cars that they can't charge up now? Electric Panda cars. It's like, and I can't remember the figures, but I was watching a video of a guy that had calculated the amount of electrical power you'd need to change all of the trucks in one of the states in America. And the whole of America does not create that amount of power, never mind that state. There's simply not enough electricity in America to charge up.
To be fair, I think if Trump gets in November, he will roll back those regulations. And that might be the saving grace of, if it turns in America, then perhaps potentially it might give support to change things over in Europe. Because the American car industry is facing real tough times. And even in America, and they don't, because Americans love their big cars, and they've got these big, I think they've got a Ford F-150 pickup with an electric power plant, and it's not working at all. They're losing money on every one. What do you think, James? Do you think if they roll it back in America, do you think that might help over here?
Well, unfortunately, we are ruled by, morons, really. And that's being very kind, isn't it, really?
Yes.
But unfortunately, they are very dogmatic as well. And that goes for the previous lot as well, because they brought all this stuff in. So all politicians have been completely taken by it. And when Port Talbot happens, you just think, well, yeah, there is a death wish.
Yeah.
And I don't pay attention to anybody at all. And I know there is a lot about this saying, well, 2030 won't happen. But then I think they are stupid enough and cruel enough to say, well, no, we're just going to make this happen. Hopefully in centuries' time, people will look back as this, we lived during crazy nutcase times. But we do. Really, all of us, we've all got children and families and relatives, and we want the best for them. And unfortunately, they seem to want us to live in a ditch. It's as simple as that. It's quite terrifying, and it does upset me a lot, but I really, because to me, I think I have a bit of common sense, and you do too. And you just look at it and you just think, well, there isn't any rhyme or reason to this. They're doing it. It's being done purely on ideological grounds. If they could join the dots properly and say, well, because this, it leads to that and that. Yeah, okay, well, fine. Yeah, you've made the argument, but they're not. It's just pie in the sky stuff.
And money, lots of money to play.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And giving our industry to China as well, which does not help. In fact, I heard that the day that they stopped the Talbot plant, the equivalent plant was started in India.
In India, yeah. Well, Tata Steel actually said they were moving production to India because they simply cannot afford
where the emissions
to do it in Britain.
Higher,
no,
you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the whole thing about China. It cracks me up. Who's pretty much controlling the world's EV mineral stock? You know, and it's China. If they're not buying it, then they're influencing governments in Africa where you know, if they can't buy it directly or have it directly, and all that kind of stuff. And yet, who's the ones opening a coal-fired power station a week? It's China. Who are the ones they're sort of hooking the whole of the world on electric vehicles while they don't use them? It's an obvious play for more control and power in the world, and you got to admire it. They've done a damn good job of it. They really have. But unfortunately, we're the ones suffering for it. And how you roll it back? I mean, you're saying in 100 years. I mean, I'd love to think that's going to be true, but I just don't know how you roll this back. Because, like you say, you've got utter sociopaths and nutters who are thick. I mean, they're thick. Yeah. They're one. It's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing again, isn't it? When Zaphod Beetlebox wasn't actually going to be in charge or anything because they figured anyone that's got the capability and motivation to persuade everyone they should be in charge is psychologically the last person you should ever allow to be in charge because they're nuts. And that's what we got. We've got a bunch of people that have persuaded other idiots, that it's a good idea to let them be in charge, and that's what they are, and they're ruining everything.
Jonathan had in the comments, we've had some great comments, by the way. We've got Dave, all the way from America, who actually works for Ford. And he says he will never buy an electric car. He says hybrid is the sweet spot. It seems to be if you can get a good run. Although if you're on a motorway with a hybrid, then the economy is never that great unless it's got a really good engine to kind of power it along, isn't it? Because if you're doing 70 on a motorway with a hybrid, you tend to find that the weight from the battery can really kind of ruin its efficiency. Isn't it? So they're quite good in towns, but as soon as you start using the petrol engine, they don't tend to be that great. But Kiwi says the Chinese do use EVs for heating, quite a decent source of heat sometimes. No, I suppose, because they burst into flames, and there've been quite a few fires in China, haven't they? When the EV plants and when they sunk a boat, didn't they? They sunk a boat when they caught fire, and it was not BMW that it was coming across to Britain or to Europe, and it caught fire and they sunk the ship. So it's very difficult now to insure the ships. With the way that the EVs, because they're obviously not built that well. They're obviously throwing them together, and they've got major problems. That I mean, it's different, because you would remember, James, as well. Like we did the old Sinclair C5.
Yeah.
See, that made sense because they could have improved that a bit. Yeah. And that's mobility, great mobility in the cities. Fantastic. That's why I think electric scooters, great mobility. I don't know why they've outlawed them. You only pay the money to rent one.
That was frightening. They are. You imagine.
But it's
back
like
in the day when they had it.
We should all have a motability scooter and race around town in a motability scooter.
A load of people do around here, and they're nuts. Honestly,
but it wasn't complicated. A C5 had a couple of batteries in it. It probably even just one battery. Was it a car
washing
battery?
Machine engine.
Yeah,
washing machine motor.
And it was about £300. And at the time, it wasn't ludicrously expensive. But now they've gone for them. Sorry, carry on.
No, that's right. No, I mean, it was a failure of marketing, really, wasn't it? It was marketed as a car, whereas really it was meant for 16-year-olds, wasn't it? It's a bit like the French sort of cycle cars, a bit, and it could have been done a lot better. I mean, it was a pretty grim thing, and Clive Sinclair was actually a very clever bloke, and I think again, if we'd have had someone else involved with him, you know, just to direct it in a certain way. Well, maybe it might have, you know, we might have led the world in something or other, which is, it's one of those great failures, which is a shame. But
because it's like, I drove a Renault Twizy, and you know, that's the kind of small electric kind of little, it's bigger than a Motability scooter. It take 2 people, and it does about 30 odd miles an hour, and it can do about 43 miles. And that actually was quite good, but it was quite expensive, about £6,000. But I thought, why don't they put a petrol engine in that? You think like a scooter engine or something, because it was also, you could feel the weight in it. You know, because something small, and if they could improve the efficiency of like scooter engines and that kind of thing, that would have been a huge, you know, Motability breakthrough for towns and cities, because it was so small and so, you know, it was a 2x2 kind of thing. You know, you could fit through the gaps. It drove really well. It was quite fun, and I thought that's great for the city. Let's do that, and let's improve the air quality. But they didn't. They've always, you know, it seems like they're almost deliberately trying to not only destroy the car industry, destroy our fun, and fundamentally destroy our sense of freedom of being able to go and do what we like.
We need to get someone to buy or license the Gordon Murray T25 and start making that, because he did an electric one and he did a petrol one with the the smart car engine in it and all that kind of stuff. But that 3-seater, totally flat floor, you could fit 3 in a normal parking space, and they parked forwards because they were so tiny. And yet, passed all the crash regulations and everything. And you're in like a mini McLaren F1 that's not a McLaren F1. Superb. And I mean, he did it as part of his thing to showcase his manufacturing technique, iStream, I think they call it. Which is sort of like computer-controlled pipe bending, effectively, high-strength pipe bending. But of course, you know, another clever man that seems to know what he's doing. But he is a car enthusiast, isn't he? He is completely mad on cars. He loves his cars, and so he designed it so well. Great idea. Just as a city car to take up, like you say, a lot less footprint in cities, and you know,
make it quick and easy to get around. But no, it's quite a thing. Similarly, Toyota has been one of the only few manufacturers, I think possibly Honda maybe verging on it as well, that are doing more with hydrogen, and have also kind of ruled out this EV future or being 100%. Do you know of any other manufacturers, James, that are that you think might hopefully herald a return to sanity?
I can't believe it's a JVC. It's JCB.
Right? Can you repeat that because you?
Oops. Do you think there are any manufacturers out there that might hopefully lead us to a return to sanity, that might actually stand up against all the nonsense?
No. I'm really I don't see very, very much. Sadly, you know, there's no hope, is there? Like, you know, Ford a few years ago were actually great. You know, they produced fantastic drivers' cars. Ford used to really understand their customers, because when they produced, you know, car ranges and car specifications, they knew what people wanted, and that was fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, it's dropped out a wee bit.
As you've said about looking at cars now, is that there aren't any cars that you want. There's nothing that you put a poster of on your bedroom wall at all. So it is quite grim. You know, and Andrew's right, probably, you know, down at the really specialist end, you know, there might be some people, but in a way that proves how difficult it is, in that, you know, you've got clever people like Gordon Murray producing things where you go, yeah, that's right. Why don't they make that? And they don't make it. So it seems beyond belief, really. So of the big manufacturers, for the reasons stated, that they don't really like cars, they don't really like no.
Yeah. It's quite a thing. On a slightly brighter note, are there any particular used cars? I know you've just bought one today from Jeff Buys Cars, who's hopefully going to come on our show quite soon. He's a lovely guy, great guy, and a great story as well for how he's done. And yeah, really, really good. And but is there any particular second-hand car that you are kind of looking for, or that you would like to buy just now?
Well, for me, yeah, I've just bought a car. I mean, in many ways, it's completely the wrong car for me, but it was. It was fine because really what I want, I look a reasonably sized automatic car that I can go into an ultra low emission zone with, and I haven't got that at all. I've got a very large manual car, which is not all as compliant at all. So, but you see, that's the beauty of buying used cars, is that you mostly end up with not what you wanted in the first place. Because if you're going to start going down the road of I want this, that, and the other, you'll never get it, and then you get thrown something. You go, let's go with that. That's in fact, it's fun, and at these prices, you can have fun as well. So it isn't like the end of the world. If it's the wrong car, well, yeah, I'll be able to get rid of it. I haven't spent all my money on it, so there's no problem. So I'm always looking at other cars, even though I simplified my life by selling a few. Bought a Mercedes actually for Mrs. Bangernomics. She's very happy with. Bought a C-Class, and that is actually it's very economical. It's a petrol, it's a blue efficiency one, and I'll tell you what, it's. I mean, I didn't reckon them very much, but driving it is great, and we're getting nearly 50 miles a gallon. I mean, it really is quite incredible. It's a marvelous car. So I've very, very impressed by that, and it's got all the things that she wants to play with in there, with electric windows and everything that anybody would need. And it's 12 years old, so we've bought a few cars recently that have worked very, very well.
I think that they were saying actually one of the few things that has really improved the efficiency.
I want to hear about Andrew's sobs.
Well, I just I had. I'm trying to remember when I had them now. My first one was a Mark 1 9000S 2 litre, G-Reg, which I got for £600. Flew through the MOT, and that one had 169,000 miles on it, and drove perfectly. And I had it for 2 years, and I did 30,000 miles a year in it, and it was still working perfectly at the end. And then someone hit it, so they wrote it off. I was gutted because I loved that car; it was superb. But they were like, "Well, it's uneconomical to repair it." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's a great car. Leave me my car." Then I had a J-Reg 2.3. Which was just after they did the facelift. So not Vauxhall, but General Motors had owned them and started the ruination by doing things like removing carpets and making it cheaper and lighter and all the stuff that, because they had the idea, didn't they, that they wanted GM wanted a quality mark. We want a quality mark to compete with Mercedes and BMW and Audi. And they didn't understand that the badge is not what makes it a great car and why people are buying it. It's the car that makes it a great car. So they moved, didn't they? They moved all car development down to Opel. They were still making them in Trollhättan, but they weren't designed there. Anyway, they did the CD, which was the saloon version. That was the next one I had after that. That had a slightly different front end, and they sort of matched the front end of the 9000 hatch with that. Then the last one I had, I used to call it the Great White Shark because it was grey, and it was the one that GM Opel had completely facelifted, totally ruined the headlights. It was a well-known thing that all the silvering used to come off the inside of the headlights, whereas the previous headlights would light up the moon. And that one, that was £250. I bought that from a guy in the Saab. I was in an online Saab club, and I got it from a fella that was selling it who worked for Transport Research Laboratory down near Windsor. I bought it from him in the car park, drove it. He said he was going to, if I didn't buy it, he was going to use it to crash into something. So I got that, and that lasted me about 3 years before the gearbox expired just outside of Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogery on the A55 with a sort of a crunching, tinkling sound, which was unfortunate. I really like that car. So, I did tons of miles in those, and then we didn't have a lot of money, so the next car we had, we were given an Austin Maestro.
Which, back. You have to give it.
It kept overheating every time you went up a hill. Overheated. So we got rid of that and we're given another one, and then we had 4 Montegos in a row, and they were all god awful. The turbo diesel, me and Hugh were talking about this the other day, actually. The turbo diesel, which was great. It did well over 50 to the gallon. Perkins Prima 2 engine. Really wonderful until it exploded near Wrexham. coming off the slip road at the bottom of Chester, the A483. Lots of blue smoke. I'm like, oh, great. So, yeah. And then the one after that was a Vauxhall Omega, the old Omega, the one that's based on the Carlton chassis. Same chassis as a Monaro. That was a great car. Best estate car I've ever encountered. Space and practicality and everything. Only a 2 litre. Would have liked the 3.2 or 3 litre. I couldn't have afforded to run it, but I would have liked it anyway. That's a nice car. But yeah, so that's I've gone on a bit further than the Saabs. My brother used to have a Saab 900 in the 80s up in Newcastle Lake, where Baldy there's living. That was great as well. But yeah, then they utterly destroyed Saab, didn't they, by making a Vauxhall Calibra with the Saab badge. And it was so bad. 3 years later, was it 2 or 3 years later, they had to withdraw it, make 1,500 changes, I believe Car Magazine told me at the time, and bring it out as the 9.3 because it was so bad. And then they made the 9.5, which I believe they locked a Saab 9000 and a Vauxhall Cavalier in a room, and they had a baby. And that was the Saab 9.5, which I kind of like the look of. I had a mate called Andy in Wrexham who was a Saab mechanic who said he used to collect Saab 9000 2.3 engines so that he could replace 9.5 engines because they suffer from oil starvation because they couldn't even just leave the engine as it was. Incredibly strong engine. They couldn't leave it as it was. They had to mess with it. And then they killed Saab, didn't they? And my biggest regret in terms of Saab is that they wouldn't let Christian Koenigsegg buy them. He would have been a marvellous Saab owner, as in the company, not just the cars. He would have taken it back to the days of insane Swedish stuff, because he is a definitely insane Swedish man. I love him. I mean, just the ideas he comes up with to put in those ridiculous cars of his. Imagine that in Saabs. That would have been amazing. They were just so strong and comfortable and great for the kids. I mean, you knew that if you were stupid enough to hit something, you would have a good chance of surviving because they were so good for crash protection. But they also, unlike Volvos, which kept the only crash I ever had was in a Volvo because it was a 360 GLE injection, and oh god. That was a horrible car. When it did, it was a horrible car. I went round a corner near Penygroes, which is the town that I've forgotten his name. Welsh singer, big fella. Bryn Terfel comes from, just outside of Carnarvon. And I went round this corner, and the back end just started sliding. I was doing 50 mile an hour. I'd been round that corner 1,000 times in 20 different cars. Never a problem. This one, woohoo! 2 dry stone walls later, I was very safe. But the Saabs would have just gone round the corner. Primary safety. Good brakes. Good headlamps till the last one. Terrible gearbox. I loved them.
It's funny though, because with old cars, especially growing up in the 70s, I was born in the mid 70s, and then so most of the cars I started remembering were really the kind of mid 80s. And my father, he bought a Triumph Acclaim. His Ford Fiesta had been stolen, the only car ever to be stolen in the town of Duns in the Scottish borders in about 30 years, and they nicked off with a Ford Fiesta. So he had to go to his insurance and get a car. And the only thing, he didn't get very much money for it. So it was either a Nissan Cherry or a Triumph Acclaim. So they were the only 2 garages in Duns. One was a Ford dealer, one was an Austin Rover dealer. And these were the 2 options he had. So he went with the Triumph Acclaim. And we hated it because it had these it was kind of semi-plastic seats, where it was like normal kind of comfort on the top. but it was that horrible plasticky type kind of material underneath. And of course, if you're wearing shorts when you were 10 years old, you would burn your legs with the heat in the summertime on this thing.
Yeah.
It was all these horrendous cheap coverings. And my father was going to an athletics meeting one night on his way to I think it was Gala Shields, and he rolled it on the ice. He went into a ditch and rolled it. He was thankfully he was fine. And of course, at the time, well before mobile phones, he didn't have one, so he had to walk to a local payphone or someone's house who had one. And he phoned my mother and said, "Look, I'm afraid there's been a bit of an incident. I'm fine, but the car isn't." And the police had said, "Oh yeah, that's written off straight away." So as soon as we found out that my father was fine, but the car was destroyed, we all cheered in the background, and you could hear us cheering. We knew we were not going to have a triumph claim anymore. You'd have to get something a bit better, and the only thing that was a bit better was a Rover 216. It was like I think it was a D registration. So
Honda Ballard.
Honda Ballard, which wasn't much better than the Acclaim, but it was slightly better. And that was the thing. But cars had charisma, and the dealers had charisma. I'm sure you would have seen that, James. When you went into car dealers in the 80s and the 90s, there was a lot of enthusiasm. Like I remember we had a local Fiat dealer in Duns, and he was great because they would bring out these new Fiat Tipos, and everyone had a Tipo because they were like 7,995 for a new Tipo. And it was like, petrols, diesels. They even had a great model. I mean, they called them the Tipo Action. And I kid you not, if you couldn't find a Tipo Action that didn't have a dent in it somewhere. So they kind of worked. What was because obviously you've worked through the car magazines over that period. What was kind of your most exciting kind of, what manufacturers did you look forward to kind of dealing with or writing about?
Well, because of my background, BMW was always great. Always very interested to see what they were going to come up with. Volkswagen in the 80s were pretty good. All of their cars. Even, I mean, on the cover of the book, I've got a Volkswagen Santana, which I don't think anybody remembers at all. Which is that one in the middle. Now, I actually had somebody try and part exchange that with me, and they'd had that for 6 months, and it was worth virtually nothing. That was it. I mean, that was the terrible thing. He felt very, very sorry for this bloke. He thought, "Oh, I really want a 3 Series," and he had this 6-month-old Santana. They only made they only imported it here because I think it had further life in South America, but it was imported here for about a year and a half and then forgotten about because everybody got confused about is it a Passat or not or whatever. But it was an interesting saloon. Volkswagen had good stuff. Audi were coming good in the 80s, which was good. They sort of understood their market very, very well. So all that stuff was, I mean, all the German stuff at the time was very, very good. But what was really happening was the Japanese were making fabulously reliable cars. Fabulously reliable cars for the people. They were fed up going outside and their Morris 1100 not starting, and you got into what was maybe a rusty Nissan Cherry by that time, but it would start every single time. It was unkillable. And that was it. That's what sums that era up, really. But the 80s were great for exciting cars, and the 90s were pretty good as well. The two of the decades, really.
Yeah, it was a kind of golden era.
I had a Passat Estate 1.8 GT. I loved that car. That was another one when idiot smashed into the back of it. My wife was waiting near the village that I lived in, the main road, and 2 cars in front stopped to turn into a side road. She stopped, looked in the wing mirror, and this guy's coming out at 60 mile an hour. That car was so strong, had the 2 kids in the back, and it protected them brilliantly. Such a nice car as well. I loved that car. That little stubby gear stick made you feel like a racing driver. Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, but you also, how much did you pay for the 2 FSOs? Remember you had was it your father?
Right, I didn't. No, it was the father-in-law. The father-in-law found them. He was a bit of a wheeler dealer, South Walian truck driver. He just managed to get. He bought them for his 2 daughters, my wife and the sister-in-law, and he got the two combined for £1,500, and they were 2 years old. Just FSO Polonaise. And I remember because I used to read Car Magazine religiously in those days. And in Good, Bad, and the Ugly at the back, it was in the they got the interesting and the boring section. It was in the boring section. It goes FSO Polonaise. Tells you a bit about it. You go for, against, and sum up. For, it has twin headlamps. Against, everything else. Sum up. In Poland, this is considered a luxury good, but so's bread. But I've got to say, that car did us proud. I passed my test in it. We did hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles in it. The gearbox decided it was going to stop being friendly, and it was getting a bit dodgy. And we drove from North Wales to South Wales to try and get give it to her dad so that he could swap it with his wheeler dealer powers that he had. And it started off with 5 gears and ended up with 1 at the end. What a god! It's literally. I mean, in the end, it's like if you had to hold it in 4th, you could put it in 5th, but if you lifted the accelerator, it popped out, so you had to keep going. I was going to say, just stopped working altogether. But it was.
James, have you ever bought a car in the worst circumstances, like maybe from a car dealer, and realize and think, oh no, this is like everything does not add up. I'm doing everything wrong here, but you really wanted the car, and and did it work? Did it work out well, or did it work out badly?
There's actually a lot of luck involved in used car purchases. It's probably about 98% luck really, and then 1% checking the tires. Overall, I've always done okay. I used to buy some cars. A friend of mine used to work abroad, and when he came back, he needed a car for a month to rock around the UK. So I always used to end up buying him terrible British Leyland products because he had like £200 to spend. So yeah, you ended up with like an Austin Princess. And,
the Princess.
And it was as bad as you think. He was arriving like the day before, and it was like I had to buy a car suddenly. And yeah, that was one of the worst ones because it was a very bright blue, and I was driving it, and it just broke down, and I left it in a lay-by, and it was there for months. And then I had to go. Eventually, I rescued it, but you could see it from space. I mean, it was such a bright baby blue, and I just sold it to a scrap dealer who said, "Yeah, I'm going to take that down the Banger races, because they do,
fair enough.
Yeah, because they do quite well." And that was So I think I turned like £150 into £60. That was great, wasn't it?
That's not too bad.
They were like a tank, weren't they? I mean, I've never actually driven one. I've been in one. Yeah. Weren't they a bit like a tank? I mean,
yeah.
They're quite big.
Yeah, that's right.
I bought recently. Well, back in May, I was looking on Auto Trader. I needed just a cheap second car, and I broke all the rules and have just about managed to get away with it so far. I went to this dealer in Durham. Now, it didn't get very well written up. The reviews were not great. They were pretty much saying like, "Stay away. The cars are terrible." Like, he got out. He drove. Had it for a week, and the engine's blowing and all sorts of things. But they were quite cheap, and I just needed a little runabout, and it was one of the also quite. It wasn't too far away, so I go to this little yard, and it's the first of all, it's raining. Everything's wet. And so they don't want to go outside, and then I sit in some of the cars. The clutches are all stiff, and it looks like it hasn't been used for a while. You can put your foot to the floor, and there's no sensation of anything happening. And some of them didn't start. They had all sorts of issues. And then my mate Jonathan, who said, I'll check the stock for you on Autocar, on Auto Trader. There says there's a Kia Ceed at the back there, so I go and find this Kia Ceed, and sure enough, it looks actually the cleanest car in the whole lot, and they only want £1,500 for it. And I thought, well, it's okay. It's an 08 plate. It's a wee bit old, but it might be the price is maybe okay. I mean, a wee bit more than I wanted to pay for it. And I go on a test drive, and it manages. It's fine. The engine sounds really quiet. There's no ticking or anything like that. Everything's fine. So I ended up. I get to the point. I asked them, okay, what would it cost, and what's the process? He then gives me a form saying, oh, by the way, it's spares or repair. You have to take that into account when you sign the contract. So I was slightly wary, but the car I thought maybe just might be all right. You know, when you have that feeling, you think, oh, I would like it, and maybe it's okay, and it's better than anything else that's here. So, and I need to get it sorted out. So I bought it, and the next day we came to pick it up. Oh, I got 8 miles down the road towards Newcastle, and I went over a speed bump, and I heard something snap underneath, and it was actually a suspension arm that had completely severed from the wheel, and but I managed. It was making a really bad grinding sound, but I thought, well, I'll be okay. I managed to get it back up the road, back up the A1. I was determined to drive this thing back home and get it back to Alec, and it got there. And then a few days later, I took it to the garage, and they said, "Did you drive this all the way here?" Because it was completely severed. And of course, it had an MOT done by a very trustworthy MOT garage near Durham. That hadn't failed it on anything, didn't even give it any advisories on any major issues.
Budget and Scarpa.
So nearly pretty much £1,000 later, because we had to get new suspension arms, we had to get new, needed the brakes were corroded and all sorts of things. It had done damage to something else and did it. So it's sitting at about $2,500 in the books. But it's a diesel and it runs really well. The economy is good, and now it's pretty much a new car underneath. It seems to work quite well. What would you say is good value? How many years do I need to get out of that to make that work?
2 decades.
Really?
You'll be fine. You've done the right thing. You've repaired it as much as you can. You still haven't spent a fortune. I mean, for some people, that's just about a deposit on on something. So actually, you've probably done okay, and you've approached it in the right way, because I think we would all think, should we throw it away or stick with it? And you've done exactly the right thing. Don't worry.
Because I did it. It was priced at $1,500, and I didn't look at the trade price. And I decided to go into We Buy Any Car, and every week they come back to me saying, "Oh, we've increased your offer on it." Because I thought, well, what kind of price would it be worth? And it's like £500, or now they give me like 510 or 514. They're not being very generous with their offers. And I think at the end of the day, if you've paid that kind of money, you kind of have to keep a hold of it. Otherwise, I think there's a limit to, if it had anything majorly else go wrong with it, I would just say, I would probably maybe try and sell it away or just We Buy Any Car it. But hopefully nothing else. I mean, everything else seems pretty solid, to be fair. So it is possible, but it's quite hard now to get a really good car or that, even that kind of age. It's diesel for about $800 or $900, because that's kind of what I'd wanted to spend. Yeah. But a lot of it is either real rubbish, or it's kind of, it's or said 8 owners, and it's from Birmingham. And normally 8 owners in Birmingham is usually, as most people say, is definitely a no-no from what it's been. And you phone up and ask for any service history, and they say, "Oh, the last owner has got it." So,
for sale, Kia Ceed, limited number of miles, used to live at a certain airfield in the south.
Yeah. It's that kind of thing, but
driven by lots of famous people.
Yeah, but no, it is amazing, isn't it? The kind of that, but that is part of the fun of going to buy cars. I remember the first auction I ever went to. There was a Renault 5. It was a 1986 Renault 5 3-door, and the only thing that was wrong with it was a little bullet hole of rust in the bonnet. Oh, there's like a little kind of an inch of rust on the bonnet, and it sold for £50. And I was really annoyed I didn't buy it. In the end, I bought a £500 Fiesta from Jonathan, who was a used car dealer at a Ford garage. What's been the best bargain you've ever bought?
What, me? Is that me?
Yeah, sorry to you, James. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, in many ways, it's the Mini I bought in 1979 for £200, which I still have. Because that was a time when you could buy a Mini Cooper for £200 at the exchange of Mart. Yeah, there used to be, sort of several pages of them. They were on the cusp of becoming classic and not and just being a very old car. When I got it, it was quite knackered, but it stayed with me. It's the car I love the most, and it's given me the most sort of fun, really. The 7 Series I bought about 10 years ago. That was phenomenal. That was £500, and I did so many miles in that, and I should never have sold it, really. And that was a great car. That was one of the best. Never had a problem with it, and it just took me all around the country. You could get it. The last owner said to me, he said, I can get in this car and think I'm going to drive to Scotland. I'm going to drive to Scotland to see Hugh. Is what he said to me. So I thought, yeah, and actually he was right. It was one of the most dependable and comfortable cars that I've ever had, and and it looked the part as well. Obviously, it looked as though I actually had some money.
Yeah.
Do you find,
you talked earlier?
I've had a couple. Sorry, I was just going to ask. Oh yeah.
Sorry.
No.
You talked earlier about Anglia car auctions. Is it East Anglia car auctions? They get a lot of wonderful classics and barn finds. Because do you go there quite often? Because some of the cars that they've been putting through, like they find these old Jaguar E-types and all amazing machinery. What's been some of the best stuff you've seen there?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, we're in strange times, I think, when it comes to classic cars, is that values really have dropped off a cliff. There's a lot of people had cars restored over the last few years and don't know what to do with them. There's a demographic thing where older people who wanted to have, an MGB or an Austin Healey have had it, and there's no appeal to younger people. So they are very good value, especially if they've been restored. I mean, that's the best thing. Don't buy restoration projects unless you're completely mad. It will mentally and financially drain you. So you really do, but a lot of the cars that they have there have been restored and well looked after, and they are going for very low money because people just want some sort of return, or they need some money because of the economic situation. So if you always promise yourself a classic, just look at the Anglia Car Auctions feed when a sale is on, because I think you'll be very, very surprised about how affordable the cars are there.
Yeah, I've heard that there've been a few like Alfa Romeo 155s going about, and you maybe get one for $2,000 or $3,000 depending on what's out there, and depending how good a version as well it was. But I love all these amazing old cars that they find, like the old MG Metro Turbo that's been sitting in a barn, or a Renault 5 Turbo, and it's been one owner, and then it's been finally publicized, and then they take it to Anglia Car Auctions and sell it. But some of the stuff that they find is just astonishing. There was one in London where I think it was like 5 Jaguar E-types and like an AC Cobra, and it was in somebody's shed. They didn't even know how they got them in there because they were kind of stacked on top of each other. And it took about 3 days to get them out, without demolishing the shed to try and get in and to get them. But some of these cars are phenomenal. I was hoping I could find an XK 120, or Jaguar or something like that would be amazing. But because it's something with a bit of charisma, or an old Alfa Sud, or anything like that, or even a Fiat Tempra. I used to like the Fiat Tempra. Andrew hated them, but I once had one in
I only hated it because the engine fell out of the damn thing.
I loved them. I loved Tipos. I loved my Italian.
Bang! What's that Fiats on the floor? It's the engine. Yippee!
But no, that's the thing, and I think that's what gives, because cars, I suppose those old cars, we find that they've got charisma, isn't it? It's an era of, you can't do the same things with the current cars or the modern cars. But the old ones you could still work on, and you can still have fun with because you drive it yourself. It's a manual gearbox and it's all there, and you have a go, and it's interesting to look at. It's got something special. That are there any kind of cars that you would recommend people look out for just now? Maybe if for some of our viewers who might be young and looking for their first car, what do you think would be a good first car just now?
Yeah, I've written something about first cars. Actually, I do have a Substack. It's free to sign up to. It's the stuff I used to do for Autocar and Car before that, where I sort of look at a particular marketplace. And yeah, I mean, Polos are great. We had a Polo for our daughter, which was an absolutely incredible car, which lasted 3 years without anything going wrong, and sold it for good money as well. If you can find a decent Polo, you really can't go wrong with it. Micras are very good cars still. There really isn't an awful lot to go wrong with those at all. Good strong cars. Toyota Yaris is a very good first car, because again, they don't cost much, and if they're looked after, they will always pay you back, and be easy to resell, which is a good one. I'm trying to think of what else I had there, but there are some very good small cars. They can often be priced up at the most expensive, but when you're buying cars for a youngster, the bottom line on it every single time, and I'm sure you know about this, is that it's insurance. You've got to start with the insurance quote and work backwards from that, because there's so many different factors about where you live and how it's used, and so many other different things, which you can hear certain people in certain parts of the country say, oh yeah, a Fiesta's great, but in other parts of the countries it isn't.
With the eco boom engines, isn't it, that go explode.
It is actually quite weird.
Them things.
And also well, EcoBoost engines is a whole chapter on itself. I have written about that extensively, but basically, I wouldn't go near them unless the belts have been done. And I've talked to mechanics about it, and a lot of mechanics won't do it because you have to buy £1,000 worth of kit in order to do them properly. So if it can't be done, it can't be done. Also, I've heard people go down the route of, I'll get my nipper a classic car. No, it won't. That doesn't fly either. That's an insurance no as well. So if you're doing a first car, it doesn't matter what it is, start with the insurance quote first and work backwards from there, and you should be fine, really. Actually, Renault Clios used to be really good around my parts, because they were quite safe, they were quite cheap, and they were quite economical, and that's the thing that actually most parents bought for them.
That's it, isn't it? Here's a story for you. German Kiwi, one of our viewers here, and it made a comment. I had a 1968 E-Type 4.2, kept it as an investment. Unfortunately, it was stored in my dad's garage, and it was crushed in the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand. Lots of books were stored in the ceiling, and it wasn't insured. So, my goodness, that's a tough one, because that would have been a beautiful car.
That's like the pain of watching the Italian Job and those beautiful E-Types and Aston getting squashed on that mountain. I know there were replicas and one of them was restored, but still, he's just like, no, don't do it. And blowing up that Miura with that poor fella in it. To that song at the beginning.
I'm hoping eventually I'm going to go to one of these abandoned car lots somewhere down south where they always. I love watching these explorer videos when they go to these old scrap yards and car lots that have been.
Do it.
They're usually in the middle of they're in the woods. The cars are in the woods. They found a Japanese car dealer or scrap yard, but the cars were all pretty solid, and they're all. I was expecting them to all be rusted away to nothing, but to my surprise, when I watched it, their cars were as solid as anything. But some of the cars that people have found. Like E-Type Jags sitting underneath another car or under a tarpaulin somewhere that they've been long forgotten about, or amazing stuff. It's kind of that's what gets your heart, palpitating when you get a chance to think, oh, what can you find? Even this, like, I think I saw one where they found it was an abandoned Ford Escort RS2000. That was actually repairable. It was solid. It was all right. And I thought, my goodness, a car like that. But now I was hearing they couldn't even sell a Sierra Cosworth at the East Anglia car auctions. They were struggling to sell them, or to obviously meet the reserves. But because up until a few years ago, even a few months ago, they were going for like 80,000 or anything like that. But obviously you've seen the market and where it's gone. Do you think even those cars are going to struggle for a while yet, or do you think eventually it might kind of pick up?
I don't know whether it will really. We are in sort of slightly strange times. I was looking at a convertible XR3 the other week, and actually that wasn't silly money, whereas a couple of years ago that would have been actually very silly money. And actually no, it was something ridiculous like 7,999 or something. It was a dealer car, and someone had it. So I think the market has gone very, very soft, and it's strange. This isn't all about books that I've written, but actually I wrote one about the 1970 Cortinas that the England World Cup squad had, and actually one of those came up for sale at an auction a couple of weeks ago. It's somebody I was very helpful to me when I was doing my book, but that didn't sell, and that is that's one that belonged to Francis Lee, and it went up for sale, and bidding ran out in the early 20s. And that's a very nice 1600E that's been completely restored, has a history. It's all, you can follow the history completely. And I think it's a generational thing as well, in that, we actually thought, a 1600E was actually quite a good boy's car. Didn't we, in the 70s and 80s? But now nobody really cares. It's just an old Ford, and that increasingly is going to happen. With them, if people want them, they already have them. They're not going to, sort them out really. And the Cosworth thing. I mean, in some ways, the Cosworth thing was mad, wasn't it? I mean, some of the prices that were asked for what were at the time actually cars that were fairly straightforward and ordinary, but very cleverly sprinkled with fairy dust by Mr. Ford, really, wasn't it? It was a very clever thing that they did. So in a way, everything finds its market. Everything is only worth what somebody will pay for it. It's as basic as that, and that's something my dad told me many, many years ago, and it will always be true. In a way, price guides are nonsense. And values are a nonsense. It's just like on the day, somebody will pay 50,000 for something, and on the day they won't. They will barely pay 20. So that's how the classic market.
Oh, I think it's dropped out a bit. But it's. See, I would love an original 3-door Discovery. When they first brought them out, they were a 3-door in 1989, and they were priced at £15,750 because my father went on a test drive and nearly bought one, and we were desperate for him to buy one, but he wouldn't do it. So we ended up with Montegos. But it was the interior of the original Discovery that was great. All these big handles, and it was a great design, and it had that TDI engine in it. Which was a fantastic machine, and now there are a few around, but you maybe pay 3,000 or 4,000 for a kind of fairly, not maybe the most best condition, but something that might work. But I just love cars that are they have that kind of charisma and charm, and they were new. They took on Mitsubishi like with a Shogun and competed with them and beat them. But that's the thing.
Well, the great thing about those, Hugh, is that they had the compass decal on the side, didn't they? The very, very early ones looked great. I mean, that's a sensational look.
Yeah, and they had the windows at the top on the rear kind of roof windows, and I always remember it had a 2-spoke steering wheel, and the only reason why my father didn't buy it is that it was too roly-poly around the corners, and he wanted a car that handled a bit better. And I said, come on, it was the first one that you would had, one of the first Discoveries in the Borders, and in fact I think they were even offering him a discount because it was a demo car, so I think it was something like 14.5, which at the time would have been really amazing, because even today that car would be worth, if we'd kept it all those years, it would have been worth quite a bit of money, being one of the originals. But it's like, have you ever had a 3-door Range Rover? Because I know those are the kind of cars now that are quite original, or they're getting quite popular.
No, those are. I mean, I did have a Discovery 2, which actually was one of the worst cars I've ever had ever. That was Mrs. Bangernomics' car. And it basically committed suicide, really. And it wasn't a scrappy one. It was an okay one, but just bit by bit. And I even took it to a Land Rover specialist who ended up sort of just shaking their shoulders like, I don't know. They were just, and it was, I mean, that's how bad it was. And then one day, the suspension went, and then 2 blokes from Liverpool came and took it away on their low loader. And gave me some money for it, but it just got worse and worse.
They needed it for a ram raid.
They did. I think that's probably what happened to it. But yeah,
doesn't matter what suspension's broke then, does it?
No, that's right. No, it doesn't at all, does it? But the indoor ones, I mean, I don't think people remember how rotten they ended up. That's the thing. Is that when Range Rovers were a couple of grand, they were awful because
I had a mate who had one.
End of their life,
a white one, the worst colour. You can see the rust.
Did you do a Range Rover?
Well, it bits of it were white. Other bits not so white. It's a V8. And he drove it like a.
It looked amazing. It was today that well, now they do the resto mods, don't they? You can buy an old banger, an old rusted one, and they'll take the chassis and redo the whole thing.
Well, that's what he was doing. He was turning it into a Tomcat.
All right. Well, they'll actually just make it. They'll make a new chassis and rebuild it as it was, but galvanized and sorted.
That's what you mean. Yeah, he wanted to turn it into a Tomcat, so we got a galvanized chassis. I nearly broke my back in the process of trying to bring it home, but from Birkenhead, and then he was just using the running gear and the engine. The rest of it was putting on this Tomcat, but Then he moved away. He moved to up the coast. So I've not seen him since. I don't know whether he ever finished it, but that was quite a few years ago. But yeah, that sounded nice. That Buick V8 drank fuel like a Glaswegian on Saturday night.
No, it's quite a thing. I was going to say just one quick question. I know we've been going for an hour and a half, and it's been very kind, James, that you've put your time aside to come on the show tonight and to give us such good fun. So I don't want to keep you too long, but the one quick question: in the early 90s, when there was kind of an onslaught of the kind of former Eastern European manufacturers coming in, like you had Skoda Estelles, you had FSOs, you had Yugo Sanas, and all that kind of thing. Did you ever get a chance to drive them? And what did you think of them?
Well, I did buy an FSO rather famously, a Polski Fiat, as they were at the time.
They were indeed,
which was fun to say the least. I bought it and wrote an article, and in a way, that's how I started Bangernomics. Really, it was the idea was to buy a really cheap car, and we got on with it. I mean, it was quite grim, but you see the other cars from they were imported for a reason. They were imported to earn money for people behind the Iron Curtain, and it was very successful. And I don't think people realise at the time what a big deal it was. And we're really going back to the 70s and 80s. Is that to get a radio in a car or to get a heated room? Joke now, but actually everything was an extra. So if you were given things like that for free, and carpets and wheel trims and all sorts of things they could easily stick on at the docks, which is basically what it was. So the importer could do that and tart them up a bit. But actually, to a lot of people, Moscovich is something that people do not remember, but actually that was incredibly popular. But they even imported Wartburgs. I mean, and those were 2-strokes, for goodness sake. And people bought them because they were very good value cars. Okay, they're a bit grim, they're a bit awful to drive, but it didn't matter because they did start and stop. And you got a lot with them. And actually people did feel as though they were getting a bargain, especially compared to a car from British Leyland at the time. So that's why people chose them. Because I do remember that happening. So they were grim, but they did have a purpose.
They were,
and they had a charm. They did. The Skodas were. My mum had a few. Yes. They had a charm to them, and they were cheap, and they were and kind of in the same way like when Hyundais came out, and you had those. Oh, what was the one they used to have? Oh, there's so many Hyundais that were very cheap at the start, but they kind of ran and they kind of worked. They were like Hyundai Stellars, wasn't it? And
Yes. No, that's right. Well, the Stella was essentially a Cortina, wasn't it?
Wasn't it the previous generation Mitsubishi Lancer? They were making effectively after Mitsubishi stopped making that Lancer. Daewoo took it and made it. I think something like that.
Yeah, they had lots of crossovers and different things, and
I mean, no, that's how they sort of started the Daewoo, that we got.
Yeah, that's right. These books will help you. These books will reveal what behind them. So buy those.
I will put the links in the description.
What was based on what?
Definitely put those links in.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's very kind of you. Very kind.
Absolutely. And where can, just to let people know, where can they find your books and where can they find you, James, so we can help you out and hopefully give you some publicity.
That's very, very kind of you. You can find me. I do something which is you get 2,000 words a week for free on Substack. So that's my latest stuff. You can go to freecarmag.com. That has my stuff on it as well. And if you ever want to ask me any questions or whatever, please do. I always answer. Just email me at james@Bangernomics. But you can find me at those places and bangernomics.com. There's loads of places. Thanks very much. But if people want to buy a book, I do appreciate that. But I still write for free because I enjoy it. I enjoy the turn of the phrase, and I enjoy looking at older cars, and I know that people enjoy reading about it. So have a look on Substack. I'm there.
Excellent. And he writes most excellently. I recommend.
Stay on the line as we close the show. But to everyone who's been watching and commenting away, it's been great to have James Ruppert on the show. I mean, with your experience and history of being this great car enthusiast and being able to buy these cars and run these incredible cars for a shoestring. It really is now more important than ever that we find out how to be able to do that. So your skills are definitely in use and in demand. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you very much, James, for coming on tonight. And thanks to everyone who's been watching. Have a wonderful week. We will see you again later on and probably on Sunday for our racing lobby. And hopefully soon as well, we will have Jeff Buys Cars, who has a channel on YouTube, very successful channel as well, and is also an original car enthusiast, like we have here with James tonight. But take care, everyone, and we will see you very soon. Bye just now.